All right, Shabbat Shalom. This lesson is entitled Slave Narratives, Part 2. And what this is our ancestors, in their own words, what occurred during slavery. Keep in mind, this is a lifetime worth of trauma, a lifetime of experiences. So these are the things that stuck out to them in these interviews. One thing I wanted to keep note is that the dependence on Esau and the Stockholm syndrome of pretty much sympathizing with your oppressors during the beginning of every interview, for the most part, they talk about who their master is first, who the missus is first, and then talks about their family, who their father was, who their mother was, if they knew them at all. Because one thing Esau did was break apart the families. Okay. So let's start with Psalm chapter 28 and verse 3. And we'll keep that on deck. And we'll start with the narratives. Now, keep in mind, this is a Fair Use Act teaching moment. Fair Use Act. Okay, so we'll begin with, I believe the name is Mary Anderson. All right.
Read by Cleo Millan. Slave Narratives, a folk history of slavery in the United States from interviews with former slaves. Volume 11, North Carolina Narratives, Part 1, by Various. Mary Anderson. 86 years of age, 17 Poole Road, RFD number 2, Raleigh, North Carolina. My name is Mary Anderson. I was born on a plantation near Franklinton, Wake County, North Carolina, May 10, 1851. I was a slave belonging to Sam Brody, who owned the plantation at this place. My missus' name was Evelyn. My father was Alfred Brody, and my mother was Bertha Brody. We had good food, plenty of warm homemade clothes, and comfortable houses. The slave houses were called the quarters, and the house where master lived was called the great house. Our houses had 2 rooms each, and master's house had 12 rooms. Both the slave and White Fox buildings were located in a large grove 1 mile squared covered with oak and hickory nut trees. Master's house was exactly 1 mile from the main Louisburg Road, and there was a wide avenue leading through the plantation and grove to Master's house. The house fronted the avenue east, and in going down the avenue from the main road, you traveled directly west. The plantation was very large, and there were about 200 acres of cleared land that was farmed each year. A pond was located on the place, and in winter, ice was gathered there for summer use and stored in an ice house which was built in the grove where the other buildings were. A large hole, about 10 feet deep, was dug in the ground. The ice was put in that hole and covered. A large frame building was built over it. At the top of the earth there was an entrance door and steps leading down to the bottom of the hole. Other things besides ice were stored there. There was a still on the plantation, and barrels of brandy were stored in the ice house, also pickles, preserves, and cider. Many of the things we used were made on the place. There was a grist mill, tannery, shoe shop, blacksmith shop, and looms for weaving cloth. There were about 162 slaves on the plantation, and every Sunday morning all the children had to be bathed, dressed, and their hair combed and carried down to master's for breakfast. It was a rule that all the little colored children eat at the great house every Sunday morning, in order that master and missus could watch them eat so they could know which ones were sickly and have them doctored.
So, not because, you want to give them a decent meal or, oh man, thanks for this free ride we're getting with 160 some slaves, they said, captives, all working from sun up to sundown, sometimes sundown. If it's a full moon, they work through the night. Um, you know, so we're gonna, give you something, a decent meal. No, we were at property. So, you had to check your property, make sure, check your car, check the oil, how much gas you got in the car. You able to keep going. If you're not able to sit there and eat a meal sitting straight up, then maybe we got to get a doctor for you. If that gangrene in your foot is just destroying your leg, maybe we got to get you some help. You know what I mean? So it's not out of love or kindness. And like what Mary's saying, like, we lived a good life. We had a decent life, but as a slave, you know what I mean? So last, you know, um, narrative, it talked about one of the captives, Israelites getting candy once a year. And that's the highlight. You know what I mean? I got candy once a year. They'll go to Raleigh and bring us back candy. You know what I mean? And that's, a gift destroyeth the heart. Like, it's not that bad. But in actuality, it most certainly is, because it's captivity. All right, let's bring that out. Psalm chapter 28, verse 3.
Con, this is the book of Psalm, chapter 28, verse 3. When everybody have it, please say Con.
Con.
Huh.
Con. Draw me not away with the wicked and with the workers of iniquity, which speak peace to their neighbors, but mischief in their hearts.
So these are very the psychological warfare rather than the physical warfare as so much. Of course, physically enslaved, but well, they treated us good. We had dinner every Sunday. You know what I mean? We had food every Sunday. We had to get dressed up, and this what we look forward to and everything like that. But it's, property, as we're seeing, is property working for free. You know what I mean? Go ahead, give me verse 4.
Verse 4. Give them according to their deeds and according to the wickedness of their endeavor. Give them after work of their hands. Render them their desert.
Render them a recompense. You know what I mean? And all praise to the Most High. They're getting destroyed now, and they're going to get destroyed more. But at this point in time, there was no internet. There was no, oh, I can't believe I didn't get a sick day last week. We didn't have none of that. We didn't have sick days or personal days, or oh, that gangrene's eating up my leg on Monday, but you got to wait till Sunday in order to get it looked at. You know what I mean? All right, let's go to Deuteronomy 28, verse 33. And this is one thing that they use to control this, the psychological warfare that these Edomites are using against our brothers and sisters at this particular plantation. All right. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. Now, keep in mind, Jake from Colombia, which of all places right now is going through it as far as the Palestinian encampments and all that other stuff. He comes out and says Willie Lynch letter is fake. And his reasoning behind it, because they didn't use that type of language back then. You know what I mean? And it would take a Jake to say that something that's so obvious that's happening to this day is fake, being at a prestigious university like Columbia. You know what I mean? So there's no difference between the Hollywood actors that got to wear a dress and embarrass us on the TV screen. These intellectuals, or whatever you want to call them, you know what I mean, have to show out for massa as well. That's not a good enough reason. You know what I mean, that this isn't true. I think they say something about the fuel. They didn't have fuel back then, so how can you say it will fuel itself for 300 years or 1,000 years, whatever it says. But when you talk about fuel and oil and all of the stuff, that's in the scriptures, so some of the stuff that they're talking about wasn't around back at this time in the 1600s or 50, whatever this came out. That it was going around thousands of years in the scriptures. So it's just lies that they push. Okay, let's keep going. So right now, oh, you so dark skinned, you so black that what I mean, or you light, same stuff happening today was happening that they implemented on us during slavery. You must use the female versus the male. You see that all day on social media. People that cannot stop talking about the opposite sex, about how terrible they are, and these niggas ain't this, and these women ain't this. You know what I mean? It's just constant. So it came from somewhere. It's a trait we picked up during slavery from Esau. You must use the female versus the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks. You know what I mean? So anytime you go in any store to this day, I'm talking about to this day, people assume you're going to steal something. You assume they're going to do something wrong, assuming that violence is about to occur as soon as you walk into a place. It is necessary for your slaves to trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. So when she starts off saying, my master's name is this, and my missus' name is that, like that's the, proud, I'm proud to be part of this, the Anderson family or the Covington family or whatever. You know what I mean? Proud to be slaves to this, they had the big house and it was 1 mile away from the main road and this, that, and the third. Very excited to be enslaved, and it's through psychological warfare. Gentlemen, these kits are keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. And to this day, whether it's a movie where Jake dies in the opening scenes or a popular TV show where the only Jake is crooked or a criminal or whatever, a woman's promiscuous, they never miss an opportunity to push the stereotypes and the division. If used intensively for 1 year, which was used for hundreds of years, right? The slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen. And of course, that is the case. All right. Now let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 33.
Khan, this is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 33. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
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 Khan. The fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed away.
Khan. So, we are out there in the field. Think about it. All that work, all that laboring, you know what I mean? We should have came out with great substance, but through these curses, we would work from sun up to sundown. I can't even say sundown anymore. From sun up to sun up, right? And not get any compensation. You know what I mean? Financially, with clothes. In this particular plantation, they said they had clothes, but the last one we're looking at, they didn't have anything. They had no shoes. You know what I mean? Feet would get cracked open and bleeding, and it's not like say, oh, let me go to the foot doctor. My foot's bleeding. No, you had to get out there and work and continue to work. Okay, and we were being crushed, oppressed and crushed, brought down low. Go ahead, career 34.
Khan, verse 34. So that thou shalt be mad for the sight of thy eyes, which thou shalt see.
And that's what they're looking for as well. Like, is this person losing it? You know what I mean? Are they able to continue on another week? That's why they brought them down on Sundays to check out your cattle, check out your property and see if it's able to keep going. Like, oh, person might have another week, you know, and they have this conversation, I'm sure, when they leave, you know, all right, go back to your slave quarters. They're like, I don't know about such and such. He looked a little distressed, you know, we got to keep an eye on him. And you know what I mean? Because this is you know, this is a business to them. Okay, go ahead, verse 35.
Verse 35. The Lord shall smite thee in the knees and in the legs with a sore botch that cannot be healed, from the sole of thy foot until the top of thy head.
So, you know, how are they looking? You know, your arms still work, you know, is that knee healing up? Because, you know, it had to be constant you know, painful weeks, painful days, you know what I mean? And, you know, slave's life, a captive's life, Israelite's life back then, you're not living to 150, you know what I mean? You had some good years. I mean, not good years, but you know, only had a certain amount of years. The average lifespan of a slave was extremely short, you know. Okay, let's continue. Let's get Psalm chapter 137 and verse 8 on deck. Psalm 137, verse 8. Let's hear the rest of this narrative.
The slave children all carried a mussel shell in their hands to eat with. The food was put on large trays, and the children all gathered around and ate, dipping up their food with their mussel shells, which they used for spoons. Those who refused to eat or those who were ailing in any way had to come back to the great house for their meals and medicine until they were well. Master had a large apple orchard in the Tar River, low grounds, and up on higher ground, and nearer the plantation house. There was on one side of the road a large plum orchard, and on the other side was an orchard of peaches, cherries, quinces, and grapes. We picked the quinces in August and used them for preserving. Master and Mrs. believed in giving the slaves plenty of fruit, especially the children. Master had 3 children, one boy named Dallas and 2 girls, Betty and Carrie. He would not allow slave children to call his children Master and Mrs. unless the slaves said Little Master or Little Mrs.
All right, let's bring that out. Psalm chapter 137 and verse 8.
Khan, this is the book of Psalm, chapter 137 and verse 8. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
Khan.
Khan. O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us.
So them little Edomite children, little master, little miss, you know what I mean? They set them, the parents set them up as being great, you know, just being born. You know what I mean? People calling you master. You know what I mean? And that's that mentality that Esau has to this day. That's why they look at you with such bewilderment. You call them the devil that the Bible speaks of. You know what I mean? You call them on their BS and their lies. You're like, how dare you? You know, I've been your master since I came out the womb. You know what I mean? Is their mentality. You know, so this is a wake-up call for them, and we'll reward them as they have served us. Go ahead.
Verse 9. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against thy stones.
You know, something that the Christian church will never read, but you know, that's payback. Okay, we got, looking at this is centuries upon centuries of oppression. So best believe that payback is inevitable. All right, how about those geomagnetic storms all over the world? You know what I mean? People look up in the sky. Think about from the eyes of a prophet. You know what I mean? That or Nat Turner. You know, they saw blood on the leaves, and the sky turned red. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if he saw the sky turn red, but I know he saw blood on the leaves. But the sky is dancing with all types of colors and amazements. And last night, and I believe tonight, it's going to keep on going. Signs in the heavens. Okay, so Esau's time is up. Okay, so now let's get Deuteronomy 28 and verse 41 on deck. Now let's keep going.
He had 4 white overseers, but they were not allowed to whip a slave. If there was any whipping to be done, he always said he would do it. He didn't believe in whipping, so when a slave got so bad he could not manage him, he sold him.
So just real quick with that, no scripture, but just, so this is more psychological than physical. You know what I mean? If you act up, I'll take you away from your family, and to this day, separate you from your family. And, that means you should stay in line, but let's keep going.
Master didn't quarrel with anybody. Mrs. would not speak short to a slave, but both Mrs. and Master taught slaves to be obedient in a nice, quiet way. The slaves were taught to take their hats and bonnets off before going into the house and to bow and say, "Good morning, Master Sam and Mrs. Evelyn." Some of the little Negroes would go down to the great house and ask them when it was going to rain, and when Master and Mrs. walked in the grove, the little Negroes would follow along after them like a gang of kiddies.
Now let's get Deuteronomy 28, verse 41.
Khan, this is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 41. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
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 John.
Khan. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity.
So he begets sons and daughters, and they'll go into captivity. One, they can snatch them away from you. You know what I mean? As soon as they're born, sell them down the road, sell them in the next state. You never see your parents again. You know what I mean? Or psychologically, like this plantation is doing, is, then they will love and appreciate them, the the evil slave masters, instead of their family, instead of their father and their mother. You know what I mean? They know, Master gives us biscuits. You know what I'm saying? Master allows us to play for 10 minutes a day. You know what I mean? And as you see, they're really attached to them to the point where they're following them around everywhere. All right, let's get Daniel 7 and 25 on deck.
Some of the slave children wanted to stay with them at the great house all the time. They knew no better, of course, and seemed to love Master and Mrs. as much as they did their own mother and father. Master and Mrs. always used gentle means to get the children out of their way when they bothered them, and the way the children loved and trusted them was a beautiful sight to see. Paterolas were not allowed on the place unless they came peacefully, and I never knew of them whipping any slaves on Master's place. Slaves were carried off on 2-horse wagons to be sold. I have seen several loads leave. They were the unruly ones. Sometimes he would bring back slaves. Once he brought back 2 boys and 3 girls from the slave market. Sunday was a great day on the plantation. Everybody got biscuit sundaes. The slave women went down to Master's for their Sunday allowance of flour. All the children ate breakfast at the great house, and Master and Mrs. gave out fruit to all. The slaves looked forward to Sunday as they labored through the week. It was a great day. Slaves received good treatment from Master and all his family. We were allowed to have prayer meetings in our homes, and we also went to the White Folks Church. They would not teach any of...
Slaki. Let's bring that out, Daniel 7 and 25.
Con, this is the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 25. When everybody have it, please say calm.
Con. Con.
Con.
Con.
Con.
Con. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time.
Con. So, Sunday is now the Sabbath. Everybody waits for Sunday. You get biscuits on Sunday. You know what I mean? These Edomites changing things, to fit their advantage, so now it passed down from, this time period of, oh yeah, Sunday's the Sabbath, so now to tell a so-called Black Christian that, you're celebrating or you're honoring the Sabbath on the wrong day, they look at you like you're crazy, you know what I mean? Because it's been passed down from their mother, fathers, grandparents, great-grandparents up until now. All right. Let's also get Numbers chapter 16, verse 13 on deck. I'm going to keep going.
Of us to read and write. Books and papers were forbidden. Master's children and the slave children played together. I went around with the baby girl Carrie to other plantations visiting. She taught me how to talk low and how to act in company. My association with white folks and my training while I was a slave is why I talk like white folks. Betty Brody married a Dr. Webb from Boylan, Virginia. Carrie married a Mr. Joy Graham of Franklin County. He was a big Southern planter. The war was begun, and there were stories of fights and freedom. The news went from plantation to plantation, and while the slaves acted natural and some even more polite than usual, they prayed for freedom. Then one day I heard something that sounded like thunder, and Mrs. and Master began to walk round and act queer. The grown slaves were whispering to each other. Sometimes they gathered in little gangs in the grove. Next day I heard it again. Boom, boom, boom. I went and asked Mrs., "Is it going to rain?" She said, "Mary, go to the ice house and bring me some pickles and preserves." I went and got them. She ate a little and gave me some. Then she said, "You run along and play." In a day or two, everybody on the plantation seemed to be disturbed, and Master and Mrs. were crying. Master ordered all the slaves to come to the great house at 9 o'clock. Nobody was working, and slaves were walking over the grove in every direction. At 9 o'clock, all the slaves gathered at the great house, and Master and Mrs. came out on the porch and stood side by side. You could hear a pin drop. Everything was so quiet. Then Master said, "Good morning," and Mrs. said, "Good morning, children." They were both crying. Then Master said, "Men, women, and children, you are free. You are no longer my slaves. The Yankees will soon be here." Master and Mrs. then went into the house, got 2 large armchairs, put them on the porch facing the avenue, and sat down side by side and remained there watching. In about an hour, there was one of the blackest clouds coming up the avenue from the main road. It was the Yankee soldiers. They finally filled the mile-long avenue reaching from Master's house to the main Louisburg Road and spread out over the mile-squared grove. The mounted men dismounted. The footmen stuck their shining guns and began to build fires and cook. They called the slaves, saying, "You are free." Slaves were whooping and laughing and acting like they were crazy. Yankee soldiers were shaking hands with the Negroes and calling them Sam, Dinah, Sarah, and asking them questions. They busted the door to the smoke house and got all the hams, They went to the ice house and got several barrels of brandy in such a time. The Negroes and Yankees were cooking and eating together. The Yankees told them to come on and join them. They were free. Master and Mrs. sat on the porch, and they were so humble no Yankee bothered anything in the great house. The slaves were awfully excited. The Yankees stayed there, cooked, ate, drank, and played music until about night. Then a bugle began to blow. You never saw such getting on horses and lining up in your life. In a few minutes they began to march, leaving the grove, which was soon as silent as a graveyard. They took Master's horses and cattle with them, and joined the main army, and camped just across Cypress Creek, 1.5 miles from my master's place on the Louisburg Road. When they left the country, a lot of the slaves went with them, and soon there were none of Master's slaves left. They wandered around for a year from place to place, fed and working most of the time at some other slaves' owner's plantation, and getting more homesick every day. The second year after the surrender, our master and Mrs. got on their carriage and went and looked up all the Negroes they heard of, whoever belonged to them. Some who went off with the Yankees were never heard of again. When Master and Mrs. found any of theirs, they would say, "Well, come on back home." My father and mother, 2 uncles and their families moved back. Also Lorenza Brody and John Brody and their families moved back. Several of the young men and women who once belonged to him came back. Some were so glad to get back they cried, 'cause fare had been mighty bad part of the time they were rambling around, and they were hungry. When they got back, Master would say, "Well, you have come back home, have you?" And the Negroes would say, "Yes, Master." Most all spoke of them as Mrs. and Master, as they did before the surrender, and getting back home was the greatest pleasure of all. We stayed with Master and Mrs. and went to their church, the Maple Springs Baptist Church, until they died. Since the surrender, I married James Anderson. I had 4 children, 1 boy and 3 girls. I think slavery was a mighty good thing for mother, father, me, and the other members of the family, and I cannot say anything but good for my old master and Mrs., but I can only speak for those whose conditions I have known during slavery and since.
Okay, so she believes that slavery was a good thing. All right, let's bring that out. Numbers chapter 16 and verse 13.
Con, this is the book of Numbers, chapter 16 and verse 13. Everybody have it? Please say con.
Con.
Con. Is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of a land that flowered with milk and honey, to kill us in the wilderness? Except thou makest thyself altogether a prince over us.
So they're saying you took us out of the land that flowed with milk and honey. You took us out of Egypt. It was beautiful there. We had cucumbers and garlic, and you know what I mean? The mixed multitude was lusting along with Israel. You know what I mean? About all the amazing things that was in Egypt, you know? So fast forward to this captivity. Hey, man, this slavery wasn't that bad, you know? Okay, so what? You had to work and not get paid, you know what I mean? You had to be under somebody and call them master, be under these Edomites that just sat on their porch all day and drink lemonade or whatever, you know, bourbon, you know, while we worked in that hot sun. It wasn't that bad, you know what I mean? And you know, this is what they say with this quote from Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman didn't say that. Well, who said that? Reuters and I don't know, Associated Press, because you know they now have what they call fact checkers. So ironically, the fact checkers go along with the narrative of Babylon. You know what I mean? They never go against it. You know, they always fact check on the side of the government And it would definitely help out this country to know that no, she never said anything like this, but I don't believe that. These so-called historians bury information all the time. So who do you believe? You know, you got to have your own mind and do your own research. Okay. But here's Harriet Tubman's quote saying, if I could have convinced more slaves that they were slaves, I could have freed thousands more. And when you look at, I read the article of why they say she didn't say this. Like, well, she didn't free thousands. She freed probably 750. You know what I mean? It's just Esau with his little semantics that you kind of see right through. But it makes sense. Just listening to this narrative, and even to this day, you know, we could bring more people into the truth if people knew that they were actually enslaved in America. Like, your tax dollars go to what you don't want them to go to. You know, your tax dollars are going to Ukraine. You know, try to divert your tax dollars to your local high school, your local middle school, you know, to fix the potholes, to fix the bridges from just collapsing on themselves. You know what I mean? You can't do that. That's enslavement. Your money, you work for wages, and your money is taken mostly, you know what I mean, before you even see it. And it goes to places you don't want it to go to. All right. And of course, stop and frisk, you know, your body's not even free. You know, you can be thrown in jail at any time, like Mumia Abdul Jamal, and you know, say that you killed a cop and be stuck in jail the rest of your life. So yeah, this is absolutely captivity. But if if you know, going on the account of the Matrix, you know what I mean, the people you were trying to free, to mentally free, are the same people that are just totally ingrained into this American dream. Okay, so let's go back to the narrative. And let's get Deuteronomy 28, verse 65 on deck.
For myself and them, I would say again, slavery was a mighty good thing. End of section 5.
So she says slavery was a mighty good thing. That's coming out the mouth of a slave, someone that's enslaved in America. So while the next part loads up, how do we get there is the question. We know we got Willie Lynch, right? There's also this book that is called Stamped from the Beginning. And on page 48, Saving Souls, Not Body, it talks about Christianity. All right. And it says, in an effort to square his Christian faith and the nations, because remember, she said she was going to church. So at one point in time, they did not want slaves to learn about Christianity because it was a woman, that was a slave named Elizabeth Key, who sued for her freedom. She learned how to read. She learned that, hold on, this we're a Christian nation. You're not supposed to be treating people like this. So she sued and won. So they're like, oh, we don't want, you know, of course it wasn't like the OJ trial where, you know, everybody found out at the same time by watching TV. So people didn't know about this. You know, the other slaves didn't know that this happened, but the masses were like, oh, we can't have this, you know, they'll be suing us and winning in court if they knew their rights. Okay. So let's continue. In an effort to square his Christian faith or his nation's Christian faith with slavery, Baxter, right? His full name is, let me see. 1 second. I'll find it. His full name is, okay, Richard Baxter, right? So he wrote a Christian Directory, right? This is a book he wrote. In an effort to square his Christian faith or his nation's Christian faith with slavery, Baxter tried to argue that some kind of benevolent slavery was possible and would be helpful for African people. These assimilationist ideas of Christianizing and civilizing enslaved Africans were particularly dangerous because they gave convincing power to the idea that slavery was just and should not be resisted. And so Baxter, a non-conforming Puritan, conformed his Puritan readers to most, though certainly not all, of the racist policies of Charles II's expanding slaveholding empire. People who have forfeited life or liberty can be enslaved, Baxter wrote. Therefore, Slakia. However, to go as pirates and catch up poor Negroes is one of the worst kinds of thievery in the world. Enslavers that buy them and use them as beasts and neglect their souls are fitted to be called incarnate devils than Christians. So if you enslave these people and you don't change their mind state, then you're a devil. Not the fact that you catch somebody and enslave them makes you a devil. You got to change their mind state into Christianity. Baxter naively, that's my own, that's not part of the book. That's what I said. Just kind of put in a synopsis. Baxter naively believed there existed in bulk in the slave trade what he called a voluntary slave. So we got to keep in mind, this woman was talking about when the Yankees came and got them, out of slavery. It was the 1860s, something like that. So this is 1600. So this is centuries before how they also trapped our mind, right? He tried to will into existence the world where loving masters brought voluntarily slaves to save their souls. Baxter's world remained a heavenly dream crafted long ago by Gomez Inez de Zahora. But even that dream world was seen as a threat by enslavers. American enslavers were still afraid to baptize Africans because Christian slaves like Elizabeth Key could sue for their freedom. So what he tried to do was, make it, mandatory that if you're a slave, you would have to be a Christian. So how did we get into Christianity? That's how we got into Christianity. All right. So let's keep going. And yeah, so we're going to get Deuteronomy 28, verse 65 on deck.
An interview on May 21st, 1937, with Cornelia Andrews of Smithfield, Johnston County, who is 87 years old. The first master that I members was Mr. Q. Williams, and he was a good master. But me and my mammy and some of the rest of them was sold to Dr. McKay Baden, who was not good to us. Dr. Baden owned a good-sized plantation, but he had just 8 slaves. We had plank houses, but we ain't had much food and clothes. We wore shoes with wooden bottom in the winter and no shoes in the summer. We ain't had much fun, nothing but candy pullings about once a year. We ain't raised no cane, but marster buyed 1 barrel of lasses for candy every year. You know that there was a big slave market in Smithfield them days. There was also a jail and a whooping post. I members a man named Ruff something or other, what bought 40 or 50 slaves at the time and carried them to Richmond to resell. He had 4 big black horses hooked to a cart, and behind this cart he chained the slaves, and they had to walk or trot all the way to Richmond. The little ones Mr. Ruff would throw up in the cart, and off they'd go. No, they said that there was one day at Smithfield that 300 slaves was sold on the block. They said that people's come fur and near, even from New Orleans to them slave sales. They said that way 'fore I was bored. They used to strip them niggers stark naked and gallop 'em over the square so that the buyers could see that they weren't scarred nor deformed. While I could remember they'd sell the mammies way from the babies, and there wasn't no crime about it war the master would know about it nother. Why? Well, they get beat black and blue, that's why. Was I ever beat bad? No, ma'am, I wasn't. Here, the daughter, a graduate of Cornell University, who was in the room listening, came forward. Open your shirt, mammy, and let the lady judge for herself. The old lady's eyes flashed as she sat bolt upright. She seemed ashamed, but the daughter.
Okay, so let's bring that out. Deuteronomy 28, verse 65.
Con, this is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 65. And everybody have it, please say con.
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 Con. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. But the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart, and falling of eyes, and sorrow of mind.
So the sister's like, yeah, that's almost like bragging, like, yeah, I wasn't getting beat. You know what I mean? A lot of niggas was getting beat, but not me. And then her relative comes in like, hold on, open up your shirt, and what happens? A trembling heart, feeling of the eyes, and sorrow of the mind. That's, had to feel, you know, she was lying to herself. You know what I'm saying? She's lying. Like, of course she got beat. You know what I mean? But this was our ancestors had to go through. You know what I mean? And that mind state of being oppressed constantly. You know what I mean? That you make up stories in your head. You know what I'm saying? Let's keep going.
Daughter took the shirt off, exposing the back and shoulders, which were marked as though branded with a plated cowhide whip. There was no doubt of that at all. I was whooped public, she said tonelessly, for breaking dishes and being slow. I was at Miss Garrington's den, and it was just for the close of the war. I was in the kitchen washing dishes, and I drapes one. The mussus calls Mr. Blunt King a patter roller, and he puts the whooping you'll see's the marks of on me. My old missus found it out, and she comed and got me. A friend of the interviewers who was present remarked, that must have been horrible to say the least. Yo don't know nothing, the old Negro blazed. Alex Heath, a slave, was beat to death here in Smithfield. He had.
Let's read Deuteronomy 28, verse 66.
Verse 66. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear day and night, and shall have none assurance of thy life.
So she got beat, causing her a trembling heart, failing of the eyes, and sorrow of the mind. But she's like, "Whoa, well, you don't know nothing. They kill people. You know what I mean? They'll beat you to death. That's what these Edomites have done. There was no Channel 10, Fox 5, NBC. A slave got beat to death. That wasn't making the news. So it happened so often. That's when Willie Lynch came into play. Like, hold up, y'all killing y'all property. You know what I mean? You can't just keep killing them. You have to psychologically destroy them, and they'll do whatever you ask them to do. And that's where we're at now, as far as that psychological warfare and keeping us back. You know, it's that the what they do with elephants, right? Baby elephants or horses, but you use the elephant because it's huge. Put attach the elephant to a chair when they're a baby, and they can't move because they're attached to the chair, right? But they get big enough where they could throw that chair wherever they want, but their mind state is still stuck at a time where they couldn't move because of that chair. They couldn't go anywhere. So same thing with us, not comparing us to elephants, but you know what I mean? Once you psychologically destroy somebody, then you can trust and believe that it would be very difficult for them to get out of that mind state, that you put them in a long time ago. And that's why it's perpetual um obedience and fear of Esau, and what could happen. Oh man, they'll throw me in jail, they'll lynch me, and all this other stuff, because these stories have been not only passed down through generations, but you can see them with your own two eyes. Like George Floyd getting a knee on his neck, and just that guy just staring blindly into the camera, like, I don't care, this is I'm doing this for my people. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna put you guys back more hundreds of years, your fear for us. But what the Most High do? Got him knifed up by a Mexican mafia member in prison. All praise to the Most High. All right, let's keep going. We're gonna finish this part out.
Stole something, they tells me. Anyhow, he was sentenced to be put to death, and the folks there in charge decided to beat him to death. They give him 100 lashes for 9 mornings, and on the 9th morning he died.
100 lashes for 9 mornings. You know what I mean? Just torture, a prolonged torture. Let's keep going.
My uncle Daniel Sanders was beat till he was cut into gashes, and he was to be beat to death like Alex was. But one day after they had beat him and throwed him back in jail without a shirt, he broke out and runned away. He went down in the river swamp, and the blowflies blowed the gashes, and he was unconscious when a white man found him and took him home with him. He died 2 or 3 months after that, but he never could get his body straight nor walk without a stick. He just could drag. I expects that I don't know who my pappy was. Maybe the stock nigger on the plantation. My pappy and mammy just stepped over the broom, and course I don't know when. They ain't let no runty nigger have no chillins. No, sir, they ain't. They operate on them like they does the male hogs, so that they can't have no little runty chillins. Some of the marsters was good and some of them was bad. I was glad to be free, and I left the minute I finds out that I is free. I ain't got no kick a coming, not none at all. Some of the white folks was slaves to get to the United States, and we niggers ain't no better, I reckons. End of section 6.
So let's get Deuteronomy 28 verse 50. He said no runt was going to have any children, as he says, right? No runt is going to have any children, right? And he said he operated them like they did the hogs. What does that mean? Castrated them. So from castration to lynching to being beat to death, to being beat to an inch of your life, and having the blowflies infect your wombs, and you know what I mean? Rough ride, to say the least. Okay. But Let's bring that out. Deuteronomy 28, verse 50.
Khan, this is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 50. When everybody have it, please say Khan.
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 Khan. A nation fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young.
So, it didn't matter if you're old enough to walk, you're old enough to work, as young as you are. If you're old enough to continue to, you might not be able to make it in the fields because you got gangrene on your leg and your foot had to be chopped off, you can do something in the house. It's constant work for centuries. All right. So these are just a few of the slave narratives, our ancestors, the biblical Israelites that went into captivity under this Edomites. So as you can see, it was pretty bad. You know what I mean? So we cannot forget, you know what I'm saying, the things that our ancestors went through. They want us to say, oh, forget that, don't worry about it, learn about the Holocaust. If you talk anything about anything to do with the Amalekites, then it's anti-Semitic. So what's coming down to is just our existence would be considered anti-Semitic, because if we're saying that we're the real Jews and they're not, then that would be considered anti-Semitic. And they're going to eventually knock off our pages, whether social media and stuff like that. You kind of see the way this is going. So what I'm going to do is try to put up as much information as possible before that happens. And Amos 8 and 11 will be on its way. Okay. But that is the lesson for today. Slave narratives, most high willing. More will be brought out in the future. But if something changes, you know what I mean, a shift in what's going on in the world, then we'll talk about that as well. All right. Hopefully this was edifying and that you learned some things. Okay. Shalom.